Hello and welcome back to another paint over. So for my students that are just trying to get into illustration and want to practice their painting and their illustration skills so that they can work on bigger and more ambitious things, I usually like to recommend starting with a single character composition and illustration, right? There's less components and factors to mess up if you're just trying to tell a more simple story and highlighting kind of less factors. So let's look at this and break it down. Alright, so at face value it's simple enough. It seems we have a sorceress of some type and she's trying to take control and command of this snake. But one of the first things I like to do to break down an image's design is, of course, to reduce the detail and the complexity of everything in it. I run the cutout filter on it. I apply surface blurring techniques. I want to look at the anatomy and the structure of this image as almost like an abstract piece first. And so, upon doing so, I'm highlighting the major shapes that I'm reading and seeing in the scene. And yeah, it's not reading the most direct way I'm looking for. A lot of the sorceress's silhouette gets lost in the mix. So that's something I'm going to, ultimately resolve or aim to. The next big thing that I'm noticing is the body language and the overall sense of space in the scene. It seems like she's trying to charm the snake, but the snake is also kind of behind her. There's also a weird awkwardness to this architectural element on the right. I mean, it vignettes it, but at the same time, is it behind her? Is it in front of her? There's a lot of like subtle little things in this that are kind of adding up really quickly. And when you have something as graphic as this piece, I recommend repeating it a few times throughout the scene, if possible. So that's kind of what I'm just slightly sketching at. So if that's an element, it's an element of design, repeat it, a few times in the scene. So the other major problem is the focal point and where the viewer's attention is going. Naturally, in a scene like this, it's going to go up to the head. But since it's not highlighted with value, contrast, saturation, and edge work, our eye gets naturally pulled to those other circles that I selected previously. Our eye's being pulled to the corner. And that's what I'm kind of highlighting here. When you're designing a scene like this, or any kind of scene, generally the questions I like to ask myself are, A, where is the drama? B, what is the story I am trying to tell with it? C, where do we look? Where does the viewer look? And lastly, D, how should the viewer feel in regards? And I try to make the shapes, the lighting, and the contrast. I mean, it's easier said than done, and it obviously takes a good amount of practice, but that's where my headspace is, at least mentally, when I'm kind of working through these earlier stages of these illustrations. So, moving forward with this, see what I'm selecting here, it's like my eye anyway, constantly getting pulled over to that light spot in the corner of the image, and that's just something we kind of don't want to deal with, and ultimately should be addressed. Next is the overall shapes and the posing of the character. I really want to get in. Since this is a singular character illustration, what we have to put on display here should be kind of really worked out and perfected. So I'm highlighting a lot of these points of articulation on the figure, and I'm drawing lines through them. It's just to show you how stiff the figure actually is. And when you have a figure that it kind of comes off this stiff, there's a lack of acting involved. When there's a lack of acting, there's a lot of lack of personality and character. And just by contrast, I pull up one of Wes Burt's illustrations here, and you could start to see all the angles that are on display here. There's not a single straight line or perpendicular line throughout the character's body language. And that's something you want to get into your scene, even if it's something more simple like a single character. So one way, as I highlighted here, a person's character has 3 different points that I like to address: the head, the torso, and the pelvic region. If you can get those all on their own axis, like kind of having them facing separate directions or combining different directions for 2 out of the 3 points, you can start to create a much more dynamic pose and action for your character to kind of follow. And yeah, you can almost feel the weight of what the character, whatever the character is conjuring in Wes's illustration. The legs are practically buckling. The cape and the cloak is, it's pushing up through all that energy. And that's what this is just lacking a lot of. Things are just a little too stiff, a little too quiet. So just as a quick, I'm not going to do a heavy overpaint on this. I'd rather just kind of talk about the design points in it. Is that, yeah, I probably have the character's head turn a little bit more, 3/4-ish. I'd have the, and there's no right or wrong solution to how you could play this character's acting and posing up. This is just one of many solutions. But yeah, I'm already starting to draw the shoulders and the hip axis on different angles. I think that'll automatically start to help you think and resolve in terms of that way. And outright, if you have a spouse, if you have friends and siblings, get them to either take photo references of you acting out what your character should be doing, or have them act it out for you, and you can direct them. The best thing you could do. It'll look ridiculous, but then when you have your photo reference, exaggerate it. Don't go one for it. Don't trace, but completely exaggerate that reference. That will really help you avoid doing even things like I'm doing, where this character is just kind of still standing here. I'm fixing a lot of the axis, but ultimately the character is still standing here in a fairly stiff way. And there's a time and a place for that, but I definitely would just encourage to push the forms and the acting, in the character overall. And yeah, I'm not an anatomy guru, and I don't try to be, but yeah, if you can work through the shapes and the acting, you can always reference and kind of put together the anatomy after the fact. At least that's how I do it. But you want to find these core shapes and these landmarks in a character that you could potentially highlight with light, even if it's ambient lighting and it's a little more softer than direct lighting. But you want to find the curves and some of these points to really help that figure really feel like it's three-dimensional. And so that would be the other major recommendation for the character. Is some of the forms just are falling completely flat on the main side of the character. Next, I would like to address the composition a lot. So that's going to come back to those questions about the story too. What is the storytelling? How can I play that up and really get into it? So it seems like the main selling point for this image is that acting in that interaction with the snakes. So of course I'm going to try to embellish that while serving the overall composition. So let's take a look at my suggestion on that now. I think we could frame or counter frame to vignette the scene that based off that architectural element on the right. I think adding the snake over here as a big shape and then changing the other snake, making it a little smaller, while taking advantage to overlap those shapes as well. I think that would help. And then adding, to some degree, some other snake in the foreground on the other side. So we have 3 snakes, the rule of odds, right? 1, 2, 3. And then kind of just putting even the essence or the, not essence, but the shadow or silhouettes of some additional snakes in the background will also, it adds to that sense of drama and tension. Like, is this the Snake Queen? Does she have a complete, mausoleum completely under her trance of these snakes, so she's making a snake army? See what I mean? It's getting me as the viewer to kind of use my imagination in a little bit more of a critical way, and inviting me to participate in this story. Last is just a few cosmetic suggestions that I make. The light is blooming through too much of the character, almost making her feel kind of ethereal, like she's kind of a spirit. But if she is a solid physical manifestation of a person, yeah, definitely get some of these forms and on the cloaks, even as we observe there from Wes Burt's illustration, something a little bit more prevalent here. So again, I changed the shape of the hood. I think the hood was just the shape of that's weak, and the silhouette was not reading. The silhouette of all her arms and her head, that is something to definitely be mindful of and to work through. And I would like to mention one more time that Wes Burt illustration, right? I pulled that up as a reference. And no aspect or intention did I have to copy it or steal what he has. But if we have our idea, we're going with it, we want to enhance it. One way when you're learning and you're training, and even professionally, is to compare your work one-to-one with somebody that did something at least similar, right? Because you'll see what are they really doing successfully here. How can I include that into my image. And that, again, that is an example of what I'm trying to show in this video, is you could piggyback off the success of others without arbitrarily just kind of copy them, right? Because we have our own story, and we're trying to tell, basically that, not what Spurt was doing in the forest. So anyway, back to the character silhouette. All right, if she's got these feather tufts and stuff on her shoulders, play those out and exaggerate them. I want to see that come through in her silhouette. All her major features I'd like to see. Anyway, back to her forms. I still would like to get some of the forms on her front side to read. And I think to do that, since the whole picture is warm, if I kind of just darken her, add a little bit of contrast, and actually use cooler tones for ambient lighting on her front side that's facing us, I think that'll just make her forms, her figure, basically just pop a lot more off the page. So I kind of slightly cooled things off with her a little bit. And I'm going to, again, like I highlighted a few moments ago, I'm going to come back and do that with a brush. But see, instead of using warm greens, I'm using cool greens. Color temperature is a huge part of getting things to read. And I think it is that contrast that will ultimately help sell a lot of the ideas on her, to give her that sense of motion and to make her feel like actually like kind of like 3D. So see, even if I don't get the color or the temperature right on the first go, I try to work that out. So I'm using cool greens in the areas where things are popping up at us, in warmer greens in the shadows. So it's not like I'm completely just making her, if I use cool in the shadows and cool in the highlights, like I just said, it's going to feel really flat and awkward. So I'm still taking those warm colors from the background, but I'm choosing them. I'm choosing to put them into the shadows. So the image itself will be unified in terms of color palettes. And that just kind of briefly show like that, like where you could potentially take something like this. It obviously would take a good amount of work to kind of keep pushing things forward from here, but I wanted to break down this week's paint over just in terms of the design elements and how you could start to think about things to improve them. And again, this is a one character illustration. Had we done a multi-figure one with 2, maybe 4 or 5 characters, that's like all the problems we just talked about here, but multiplied, times 5 or whatever. So it really does add a lot of complexity to things. So if you're still training, keep things simple. Try to make them work on a very simple and basic level, and then amp things up and progressively challenge yourself over time. Anyways, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see more, and take care. Thanks for watching, particularly if you made it to the end here. If you'd like to support the channel, please like, share, and comment. You can find me on Facebook, ArtStation, and Instagram. Now, I share different content on each platform, so feel free to stalk me across the web. Feel free to join the Brush Sauce community as linked below. We do hangouts, have a Discord channel, host challenges, and support each other in artistic growth. Finally, if you'd like to inquire about my one-on-one mentorship program, head over to tyleredlinart.com, click on the mentorship tab for information, and shoot me an email. Also, I run 2 courses at the Computer Graphics Master Academy. Feel free to check out those as well. Take care.